Britain exploded into riots recently following the killing of 3 little girls by a second-generation Rwandan immigrant at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport for a motive we haven't been informed about yet. Following the murders of these kids, British leader Keir Starmer cracked down hard on people angry about kids being murdered. In an information vacuum, rumours flew around and British people, understandably furious that the government yet again couldn't keep British children safe, came out onto the streets to protest, and some of them rioted. And Muslim mobs came out on the street as well to counter-protest, and some of them were armed. Instead of acknowledging people's concerns, Keir Starmer inflamed the situation and called everyone
far-right thuggery.
The police saw an opportunity to finally whack some protesters over the head without getting called racist. Dogs and baton charges were deployed, men were punched in the face, pension-age women were cuffed and arrested. Let's just take a moment to appreciate the amazing job the police have done keeping armed Muslim mobs safe from these women. We were told the rioting was by the EDL, a far-right British group that was disbanded over a decade ago. Does this woman look like the EDL to you? Maybe if it stands for English Dinner Ladies. This was obviously two-tier policing. Keir denied this, but as I'll show, the police openly admitted to it. But they didn't have to. It was obvious. The police ran away from ethnic riots in Leeds just a couple of weeks ago, and a mob of Muslim men was left alone to rampage outside Rochdale police station, screaming Allah Akbar, kicking in the doors and chucking eggs at the windows. It's not just two-tier policing, it's two-tier politics and two-tier reporting in the media. Keir Starmer took the knee for BLM, but he sticks the boot into British people. And this concern over government-imposed mass immigration managed to do what 4 decades of peace talks couldn't manage. It united British and Irish nationalists. And Keir Starmer cynically exploited the crisis to give himself authoritarian powers to introduce a surveillance state, police the internet, smear critics of the government, and basically make it illegal to be right-wing. And he announced nothing to make children safe. And all the while, more and more unvetted fighting-age men from violent medieval cultures were welcomed onto British shores by an establishment that then dumps them on working-class communities, storing up problems for the future. With inter-ethnic warfare erupting on the streets of Britain, are we sliding into a Lebanon-style situation? I'll look at the two-tier response from the police, the politicians and the media, and the issues that brought Britain to this point, and I'll show this man getting hit in the spuds because it's funny. Let's start off looking at the police response. We've seen 10 months of the police giving kid gloves treatment to anti-Israel protesters who desecrated war memorials and screamed for genocide, and we've seen them completely ignore recent ethnic riots. But now police suddenly remembered how to use their batons. And they remembered how to set dogs on people. And they remembered how to arrest people. Journalists from media outlets critical of the government were arrested and then de-arrested. This is a tactic to show this is what we can do. Now compare that with how the police dealt with the armed Muslim mobs who seemed to be allowed to roam the streets without any police interference.
Some carried weapons amid rumours the far right were coming. The police now under pressure to explain why they didn't do anything to stop people who were clearly armed.
A police liaison officer was filmed telling a group of Muslims in Stoke that if you have any weapons, discard them at the mosque.
If there's any weapons or anything like that, what I would do is discard them at the mosque. Leave them here. You don't give anybody any reason or have any interaction with the police, negative interaction. That's my belief. So if there's any weapons, get rid of them.
Leave your weapons at the mosque. That's reassuring. Isn't this how Hamas started? The police told the Muslims that they were there to protect them.
I just need you to understand we're not against you guys. We're here to help and protect you.
We all understand, yeah.
Piecing together footage, you can hear a Muslim mob stating that they're going to attack a pub.
What you say? Yeah, we're going there. 100%. That's the pub, we're going to go inside the pub. Randy's pub, yeah?
Then they attack the pub.
Come back!
And then the police say they didn't make any arrests.
I was just wondering if there's dispersal orders in the area. No. So you wouldn't disperse people in a situation like this? You wouldn't like start giving dispersal orders? Or kettle them all in and take all of their addresses and details, because we've seen it in recent days where people have been kettled in.
Well,
they've just attacked. Well, they have. They've just attacked the pub.
Not the people when we got here. They weren't.
But there's criminal damage to the pub. I've just recorded the window being smashed. So no arrests have been made, no. And nobody's been dispersed from the area. That's all you need to know, people.
But Keir Starmer insisted that our eyes were deceiving us.
There's no two-tier policing. There is policing without fear or favour, exactly as it should be, exactly what I would expect and require.
Unfortunately for Keir, a senior police officer unwittingly revealed that yes, the police do treat each side very differently.
Why was there such a low-key, should we say, police presence? Because, I mean, clearly your officers were there, but they were not visible, and yet there were an awful lot of people out and an awful lot of people who were armed with various weapons.
So we have really strong business and community relations, and because we were aware through intelligence that there was a potential protest through that misinformation yesterday, we had the opportunity to meet with community leaders, with business leaders prior to that event to kind of understand the style of policing that we needed to deliver during the course of that operation. So we knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like, and so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
So they met with the Muslim community, who they've got such a nice cosy relationship with, including business links, whatever that means, and the Muslim community told them they weren't going to cause any trouble. So the police went, okay, great, we trust you, and didn't ask why they were carrying machetes and baseball bats. For one community, policing seems to be something that you're offered on a menu to choose from. Oh, I don't think I want to get stopped while I'm running around with a machete. I'll tell the community liaison officer that I just need soft touch policing today. Man, British people don't get to choose what style of policing they get, they just get the tough style. And the police chief for West Midlands Police issued this statement to the Muslim community.
Salam alaikum.
What was that?
Salam alaikum. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the leaders and elders that have afforded me this opportunity to speak to you personally. There is one tier of policing that applies to all of us, and that means that we police without fear or favour.
No two-tier policing? Well, where's the video for the British community then, reassuring them that the police will do everything they can to stop little girls getting stabbed? Where's the video reassuring white people that the police will stop them getting their heads stamped on by mobs of men who are targeting them because of the colour of their skin? Salami alaikum seems to be the new catchphrase for Britain's police, who say they engage with all communities.
Hello, salam alaikum. My name is Phil Hutchinson and I am the Superintendent for Greater Manchester Police based in Oldham.
Geez, this looks like a hostage video. If they engage with all communities, where's the video of them engaging with the English community, starting the video saying, oi oi? And Britain's most senior police commissioner, Donna Jones, released a statement, later withdrawn, saying that Keir Starmer's two-tier approach incited protesters. When questioned about two-tier policing, the head of London's police broke off a reporter's microphone.
Are we going to end two-tier policing, sir?
Apparently it's okay for him to destroy property when he's angry. Even his criminal damage was two-tier, as the reporter was white. And if you thought the police bias was bad, the media reporting was almost satirical. Look how they reported on other riots. Leeds was covered in The Guardian as, "We're all in it together. How unrest in Leeds escalated and was diffused, as if the community had come together to save a boy stuck down a well instead of burning buses and flipping police cars." According to another paper, the rioting in Leeds was the language of the unheard. Well, who's listening to the concerns of British people about uncontrolled, unvetted illegal immigration? Even the coverage of the 2011 riots, which resulted in huge destruction and several deaths, minimised any thuggery, excusing the riots as catalysed by the shooting of a criminal. Look how the BLM protests were covered in the BBC. 27 police officers injured during largely peaceful anti-racism protests in London. It seems to be a common theme that riots are justified if a violent criminal has been killed, but not if innocent kids have been. But even a media straining to show the narrative of far-right thugs and find footage of community leaders being nice to the police couldn't help but accidentally reveal the truth. A reporter is telling the audience about whatever terrible things far-right thugs had done when an armed gang of Muslim men walks behind her.
Then there was this, as I say, clash between protesters and the police, and that is when they then ran off across the park here. A big group ran off, looking for trouble, it looked like, to us. So we're just going to step away now from this group behind us, but a lot of disorder here, a lot of...
And most hilariously of all, Sky News were reporting from Birmingham when this happened.
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well because...
Hey, yo, free Palestine! Free Palestine! Fuck India!
Right, I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger, I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Katie, I think Becky, I apologise. We need to... leave you there.
One of the diverse, vibrant young men then tried to slash the tyres on the Sky News crew's vehicle.
Do not mind anyone. He's seen us. No.
He's gonna
Gonna do the same to us.
Sky then reported on it, leaving out every detail so the reader assumes it's far-right thugs. This isn't news, this is establishment propaganda. And look at how the BBC reported on this car getting attacked and its windows getting smashed in by a Muslim mob. According to the BBC, BMW set upon and Asian men inside attacked. They're not just hiding or minimising it, they're presenting it as if far-right thugs have attacked Asians, when the actual truth was that Asian men attacked a car carrying white people. We're supposed to be able to depend upon the BBC to be unimpeachable in pursuit of the truth, but when they're not abusing kids, it's reporters straight up lie to spread establishment propaganda. And when a rumour went round that the EDL were planning demonstrations, leftists and Muslims went out on the street to counter-protest. And when no EDL turned up, probably because they don't exist, the armed far-left thugs and Muslims rioted, chasing police down the street.
There's all peaceful giving speeches.
And trashing shops.
So confused. Why are they trashing the place? This is the only place in England today I've seen getting trashed. What is going on?
But the media covered it as anti-hate marchers face down far-right thugs. So the left were sharing rumours that the EDL were going to come out and protest, which is misinformation, which we're told is bad. Then they rioted, which we're also told is bad. So why is the media kissing their arse, and why aren't they all getting arrested? Well, almost all UK broadcasters are staffed entirely by effete liberals enthralled to wokeism. They're incapable of running a story that contradicts the mantra, diversity equals strength. To do so would be akin to a 17th century Catholic cardinal giving a speech denying that the sun orbits the earth. So journalists such as Ian Dunt tweeted, "Riots work" during BLM, but apparently this week's rioters have no legitimate concerns. They're trying to start a race war, they're doing the Nazi salute. Strangely, Ian and the entire media class were silent when Palestinian protesters were doing the Nazi salute or displaying swastikas. I guess some riots are just more equal than others. And as well as two-tier reporting of the protest, the media didn't exactly hold the government's feet over the fire. Now, I'm not saying Britain is run by an incestuous cabal of elites, but the Home Secretary was interviewed on TV by her own husband.
There have been identifiable individuals on social media who have been inciting not just riot, but violence. They've been using racist language. They've been using falsehoods about what happened in Southport. This is happening on the social media platforms. What can be done, what should be done now by the social media companies and the police and the government to stop this happening? Because it's been happening for a week.
Well, you're right, Ed, that we have seen these what things that are appearing online that are clearly criminal. That social media has put rocket boosters under the far-right extremist organisation and also some of the violence that we have seen organising some of the violence. Things that are criminal offline are also criminal online. So we also expect the police to be pursuing criminality, illegal material that is online, and to make sure that they also face the full force of the law. And there's also an issue about social media companies here. They have to take much greater responsibility for what is happening on their platforms that, frankly, they make huge amounts of money from, and therefore they need to take much greater responsibility. We're going to be pursuing that with the social media companies this week as well.
Our media class and political class are literally in bed with each other. We're just North Korea with extra calories. And we desperately needed someone to hold politicians' feet over the fire because their response was also blatantly two-tier. Look how differently Yvette Cooper talks about two different riots, one by migrants in Leeds because children were taken into care, the other by Brits in Southport because children were killed.
Well, I've been talking to West Yorkshire police officers and also local community leaders about the action they're now taking in response to those unacceptable scenes of disorder and criminality that we saw last night. The community is working very closely together in response to what was a local child protection incident, but it's really important that the community can feel safe on the streets. So appalling to now see those same police facing violent attacks from thugs on the streets who have no respect for a grieving community. It's a total disgrace. Frankly, this is a time when everyone should be showing respect for a community and for the police.
It's blatant. With ethnic riots, it's all community leaders and community working closely together. But when it's British people, it's violent thuggery. And look how Starmer responded to BLM.
Like you, I was shocked and angered at the killing of George Floyd and the response of President Trump and the US authorities to the peaceful protests, to people rightly demanding justice, has been an affront to humanity. The last week has shone a spotlight on the racism, discrimination and injustice experienced by those from black and minority ethnic communities in the US, in the UK and across the world.
Now let's have a look at how he responded to these protests.
Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online.
He had an opportunity to recognise that people are legitimately angry and acknowledge that the experiment of mass immigration and multiculturalism started under Tony Blair has failed, and pledged to control borders and improve integration and national unity and stop blatant two-tier policing and make British children safe. Instead, Keir Starmer cynically exploited the disorder to introduce a surveillance state, police the internet, smear critics of the government and his enemies, and basically make it illegal to be right-wing. These were just powers he wanted anyway. The crisis suits him. He wants to control the internet and shut down Twitter because that's where people can see the truth behind his ridiculously one-sided narrative. And Keir Starmer's Labour Party accepted £5 million from Dale Vince, who funded Just Stop Oil protests. Keir doesn't want to stop all protests, he just wants to stop the protests that are against him and his ideology. It's pretty obvious that far right is just a dog whistle for white working class. You know, the people Labour used to represent but now despise. A Labour politician, Ricky Jones, even called for far right people to have their throats cut while a crowd of lefties cheered.
They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cull their throats and get rid of them all. I just want to say thank you all. I'm going to leave it now. And free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Thank you. God bless you all.
Great to see you got the hate off the street, guys. And yeah, that's right, that was a representative of Amnesty International. Remember when Amnesty International were a human rights organisation instead of cheering for the throats of political dissidents to be cut in extrajudicial killings? I'm glad I cancelled my membership. Hey, but don't forget who the real victims are, people who aren't being threatened with their throats being cut. Hamza said he might raise his family outside Europe because of Islamophobia. Don't threaten me with a good time, Hamza. I thought you were supposed to be encouraging people not to riot. Still, it's revealing that his faith is more important to him than his country is. And look how Labour politicians responded to Muslim violence. A rumour spread about a far-right mob in Birmingham, so mobs of Muslim men went to the area and lots of news crews turned up to get footage of the far-right and push the narrative of far-right thugs. But there weren't any far-right people there. There were just Muslims who were defending their mosque by doing burnouts and waving Palestinian flags. This is when that Sky journalist was mobbed by masked men shouting for a free Palestine, and the Sky van's tyres were stabbed. With no far-right people there, Muslim mobs went on the rampage, attacking a man outside a pub. However, instead of condemning this violence, the local Labour MP Jess Phillips made excuses for it. These people came to this location because it has been spread that racists were coming to attack them. This misinformation was spread entirely to create this content. So according to the government, when British people riot, the problem is far right. But when British people do nothing and Muslims riot, the problem is also the far right. I'm starting to think the problem is the government. Why aren't Muslims condemned for rioting based on misinformation like British people are? This is the bigotry of low expectations. Jess Phillips is saying that Muslims can't be expected not to riot. These sharks came to this area because someone chummed the water, and it's not their fault they're eating people. Sharks are the fish of peace. And remember the guy getting stamped on outside the pub? Jess Phillips minimised that too. I've spoken to police and pub staff at sites of violence tonight. Pub has been visited by lots of lovely communities sending solidarity and are locking up for the night now as usual. See guys, multiculturalism is a strength because after a mob is stamped on your head, other people will show solidarity. But let's have a look at those members of the community showing solidarity. Look at that insignia on that man's chest. Is that the same insignia that's seen on the jacket of one of the men kicking that guy's head in? Yeah, that's right, Jess. Lots of lovely communities sending messages of solidarity. And while Keir Starmer accused Nigel Farage of disinformation, the left was spreading lies of its own. Starmer claimed that far-right thugs are bussed in from outside areas to take part in the riots, but analysis of court documents shows that 7 in 10 of those in court lived less than 5 miles from the scenes of violent disorder. For all the talk of the EDL, it was disbanded in 2013. And the talk of Russian links to social media posts seems a bit fanciful. They claim social media posts have the hallmarks of Russian interference. But the Southport stabbings have the hallmarks of previous Islamic extremist attacks. But speculation around that was condemned. I'm unconvinced that the protests are driven by the far right. Actual neo-Nazis do not stand with these protests. They've always stood with Islamists. From Hitler to today's weird little ones. Genuine Nazis are always weedy. If someone's been to the gym, the chances are that they've got a well thought through political position and are basically a cool guy who likes to party. And the most egregious misinformation came from people who pose as trusted arbiters of the truth. Hope Not Hate, who claim to be anti-fascist but are in fact extremely fascist and harbour people with openly extremist opinions, people who, for example, were in the National Front, genuine far-right groups.
My colleagues and I,
From the National Front
and the British National Party, the BNP, we went to a meeting to exercise our right to free speech, and we got into this meeting and we saw we outnumbered and we outpowered the people in there who were mainly women, mainly Asian women, and they attacked us, or we attacked them. With hammers, with chairs, with tables. It hospitalised 17 people.
Well, Hope Not Hate spent all week telling people not to share dangerous inflammatory misinformation. Then the head of Hope Not Hate, Nick Lowles, shared this. Reports are coming in of acid being thrown out of a car window at a Muslim woman in Middlesbrough. The police denied that this had happened, but Nick left this dangerous misinformation up in the knowledge that Muslim mobs were roaming parts of Britain looking for white men to attack. And lo and behold, here's a Muslim man clearly incited by this false rumour.
Our fathers have come from a different country to here. We were born here. We are British, Pakistanis, we are Muslims. We will stand here. We will fight against EDL. We will fight our ground. Our innocent Muslim sisters are getting acid attacked. Mosques are getting broken. Everyone should be here. Fuck the EDL.
And you know how lots of lefties turned out to face down the 100 far-right riots and it was on every front page? This was more misinformation spread by Hope Not Hate. If anyone goes to jail for spreading dangerous misinformation, Nick Lowles and the rest of his extremist goons need to go too. And what a coincidence! An emergency fundraiser to stop the imaginary far-right and grubbed tens of thousands of pounds from gullible, terrified leftists who were worried about the 100 riots worth of jackbooted Nazi goons that they'd been told were around every corner. You got played, lefties. There weren't 100 far-right riots happening. There's probably less than 100 genuine Nazis in the whole of Britain. Although Hope Not Hate unwittingly revealed that the rioting hasn't been the coordinated bust-in far-right thuggery we're told it is. It looks like it is just local lads kicking off spontaneously. And the police lied too. While the police should have been preventing these murders, they were instead busy arresting Tommy Robinson under terror laws. They then lied about it in the media, saying they hadn't arrested Tommy. But it later emerged that they had. Now look, maybe Tommy's a terrible guy, but if so, you shouldn't need to make up lies about him. And of course, the government themselves incited violence with Keir Starmer's dehumanising and utterly wrong smears of far-right thug on every white working-class British person who protested. He could have tried to defuse this situation. Instead, he put a target on every white man's back. And if we're going to talk about misinformation, what about diversity equals strength? Wasn't much of a strength in Lebanon. Multiculturalism benefits society. It didn't do much benefit to society in the Balkans. Islam is the religion of peace. Man, Taylor Swift just had to cancel 3 concerts in Vienna because of a plot by teenage Islamists who are radicalised online. And what does the government do? Instead of addressing the underlying issues or reassuring people, they attack social media platforms for letting people share information that undermines the government narrative of all bad things because of far-right thugs. And they tell people that if they share footage of the riots, they can be arrested.
So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence. And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth. So it's a really, really serious. People might think they're not doing anything harmful. They are, and the consequences will be visited upon them.
People weren't rioting because of misinformation spread by Andrew Tate. Nobody looks to Andrew Tate for a dependable take on events. The reason rumours spread so fast after the horrific murders in Southport is that the government didn't release any information. Then even when it started trickling out, it was blatantly biased as well. The media were quick to try and minimise any link to immigration. Rumours spread that the killer was not British. The media went into overdrive. Fact check, he was born in the UK. Oh yeah, he's British. Yeah, he's so British. If I was to give my top 3 most British people, I'd probably have to say Hugh Grant, the Queen, and Axel Muganwa Rudakabana. And look at the pictures they used for him. These must be from about 6 years ago. Man, my Tinder profile used more up-to-date pictures than the media reporting on this guy. Compare these pictures with the court sketch. Yeah, he doesn't look like a skinny little boy there, does he? Look at that head. Apparently his dad's from Rwanda and his mum's a light bulb. People on Twitter bleated, his mum gave birth in Britain, so he's British. Oh, and if she gave birth on a picnic table, would he be a tub of coleslaw? Yeah, there's a bit of paper saying he's British. That means he's definitely 100% as British can be. Although it's interesting that the same people who've decided that he's 100% British also say that white Americans and Israelis are European colonisers on stolen land, even after hundreds of years. Every word in the media was chosen to play down anger, describing him as an introvert from a nice family, only a boy. Yet while he's described as a 17-year-old boy, a 15-year-old arrested at the riots is a man, apparently. A 17-year-old boy and a 15-year-old man. Did they arrest Benjamin Button? The left came out to condemn any speculation over his background, as if being a second-generation migrant with parents from a country notorious for ethnic conflict and genocide could not possibly have any relevance. As people speculated as to the motive, the attacks matched the pattern of previous Islamic terrorist attacks, the left condemned that speculation too. But if a white kid had gone on a rampage at a mosque, they'd obviously immediately condemn white supremacy and systemic racism, which they did anyway. Dr. Shola managed to twist things to actually blame Britain for turning him into a murderer. By her own logic, we should shut the borders immediately to stop evil Britain turning anyone else into a murderer. And so many questions are hanging in the air. How did security services know who to arrest so quickly? Why, almost 2 weeks on, is there still silence as to his motive? Why do I have the feeling that if the killer was influenced by Andrew Tate or the far right, we'd know all about it already? The Prime Minister seems certain that people are just protesting because they've seen an opportunity to exploit, to cause havoc and have a fight. There's no recognition by Keir that this disorder could be fueled by a genuine revulsion at little girls being killed, rather than a mythological platoon of far-right goons who've finally seen an opportunity to riot. This is bizarre. Of course, this is something that normal British people feel very deeply about. 3 children were killed. Compare this with the Leeds riots, which were over a child taken into care by the authorities to protect the child, or the Rochdale police station riots, which were to get a man released who'd been arrested for punching a woman in the face, or the 2011 riots, which were because some teenagers wanted new trainers and someone wanted to steal the most idiotically large bag of rice. Man, that guy's probably still eating that. But if British people riot because little girls are killed, that's not a valid reason? If you're left-wing and you can't understand why people are furious that children were killed, try to think of the innocent children as a violent criminal full of fentanyl who died resisting arrest in another country. Yeah, the one you cried your eyes out over and burned down cities for and took their knee for and pledged to change the system for. Do you get it now? Keir Starmer dismissed the reason for the rioting as something that just doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter what apparent motivation there is. This is violence, it is not protest. It doesn't matter what the motivation is.
But it does. This crime was a new level of horror, somehow worse even than the massacre of little girls in a terrorist bomb attack at an Ariana Grande concert, because with this one the killer had to go from child to child, deliberately targeting each one. I know a lot of leftists don't have children, but let me tell them, children are so full of joy and they're so trusting, they have to be protected. This can't happen again. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what it takes. I don't care if someone in some medieval part of the world feels sad because they don't get to live their dream of being given a council house in the north of England or working cash in hand in a car wash. I don't care about being called racist or far right. This can't happen again. Close the borders, deport criminals, keep kids safe. These protests were motivated by genuine feeling. People feel so strongly about this that it even overrides long-standing sectarian divides. This crisis managed to do what 4 decades of peace talks couldn't: unite British and Irish nationalists. In Belfast, British and Irish nationalists marched side by side, flying the Union Jack next to the Irish tricolour. These are people who used to bomb each other and shoot at each other and still march and fight against each other, but they're united in opposition to uncontrolled mass immigration and unvetted migrant men being dumped in their communities. If these were just thugs who were motivated by hatred and the desire to fight and destroy stuff, well, they'd be fighting each other and destroying each other's stuff. They've done it plenty of times before. Instead, they've overcome their hate and they're avoiding violence. And there was generally a catalyst that sparked the rioting too. In Southport, for example, the vigil was peaceful until a Middle Eastern looking man appeared brandishing a knife, which understandably put people a bit on edge. Although he turned out to be a guy called Jordan, so he's not from the Middle East, he's just named after it. Keir's solution to this crisis will make it worse. Keir Starmer is going to release at least 500 prisoners to make room for rioters. Let's have a look at some of the people he's releasing. He's releasing one of the killers of a teenager who stabbed a 14-year-old with a machete. Keir seems oblivious to how this all started. But hey, at least that person who said mean things on Facebook will be in jail. I feel safer already. And these riots didn't happen in a vacuum. We've got to look at this incident in the context of a long history of similar crimes committed across the West. An immigrant from Algeria stabbed multiple kids and a woman in front of a school in Dublin in November 2023. Lola Daviet was tortured, raped and killed by Algerian migrant Dabia Benkared in 2022 in France. In 2023, a Syrian refugee stabbed babies in their strollers in a children's play park in France. 16-year-old Lucy Lowe was killed by Azar Ali Mehmood in Telford. He had been grooming her since she was a child and she was now pregnant with his child, so he burned down the house she was in and killed her, her unborn child, her mother and her sister. Ebba Akerlund was 11 years old when she was killed by a truck that asylum seeker Rakhmat Akilov drove into pedestrian crowds in Stockholm. He did it on behalf of Islamic State. 13-year-old Leonie Wallner was raped and killed by Afghan immigrant Razuli Zubadullah in Vienna, who later came to Britain as a small boat migrant and filed for asylum. 10 children were killed in Nice in 2016 by a Tunisian man who drove a truck into a crowd of families watching fireworks. In 2017, Salman Abedi, a Libyan who'd been rescued from Libya and given safe haven in the UK, detonated a bomb at an Ariana Grande concert and killed 22 people. The youngest victim was Safi, an 8-year-old. A security guard was suspicious of this man, but didn't apprehend him because he was afraid of accusations of racism. And a school teacher at Batley Grammar School is still in hiding after a mob of Muslims pledged to kill him and his family because he showed a picture of the Prophet Muhammad to his class during a lesson on press freedom and religious extremism. Instead of arresting the people issuing the threats, the school was forced into issuing an unequivocal apology for showing the completely inappropriate cartoon. And in Wakefield, a schoolboy slightly scuffed a Quran and was subject to death threats from adults, but instead of tackling the adults who'd committed a crime, I believe it's still a crime for adults to threaten to kill children, the police staged a weird show trial where the boy's mother was compelled to wear a headscarf and beg for forgiveness from the Muslim community.
Firstly, thank you so much for letting me come here today to speak to you. I know that what my son has done is disrespectful. He didn't have any malicious intent, but he's a very, very silly 14-year-old boy who does have some challenges. He does suffer with high functioning autism. It means that socially he doesn't always realise what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And on this occasion, he has been completely disrespectful. He hasn't understood how sacred your holy book is.
A British politician, Sir David Amess, was stabbed to death by an Islamist while meeting with members of his constituency. Britain offers asylum to people fleeing violence, but sometimes they bring the violence with them. As well as the Manchester Arena bomber who was rescued from Libya by the Royal Navy, there was the guy who tried to blow up the Liverpool maternity hospital who was a refugee from Iraq. There's the 2007 London bombers, the Parsons Green bomber, the London Bridge attacker, the Reading knife attacker. Would people be so blasé about all this if far-right thugs were behind it? And the backdrop of this is the ongoing scandal of grooming gangs, which have seen up to 1 million British children groomed, raped and even killed in crimes so horrific that we as a nation cannot face them, even though they're still happening. And talking of two-tier policing, the child victims of the grooming gangs were often targeted by the police, while their abusers were allowed to roam free.
An 11-year-old girl came to the attention of the police after she disclosed that she and another child had been sexually abused by a group of adult males. Just a few weeks later, she was found in a derelict house with another child and a number of adult males. Yet she was arrested, 11 years of age, she was arrested for being drunk and disorderly, and none of the males were arrested. Has your force identified the police officers involved in that and found out what went on?
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know.
All right. In paragraph 4...
But people will insist that the benefits outweigh the downsides. Imagine Britain without the cuisine they implore. Oh yeah, imagine Britain without a 14-year-old grooming gang victim being ground into kebab meat. And people insist that keeping our borders open to the world is the morally correct thing to do. Now it's laudable that people want to believe that open borders is still a good idea, that the West can assimilate large numbers of radically culturally different people. And I understand why British people find it easier to point the finger at each other and scream racist. But not dealing with this problem is just storing up a bigger problem for the future. I'm in favour of immigration, controlled, vetted immigration, like you get in Australia, but Britain has had insanely high levels of about 1.2 million new arrivals every year, according to official statistics, and many more we don't even know about. Britain has a steadfast refusal to implement any form of border control. If you can get here on something that floats, you get to stay, and you get looked after as well. We've also seen a very rapid rise in the Muslim population. It's risen by 44% just in the last decade. Muslims make up a third of the population growth in the UK. Now look what happened to other countries such as Lebanon that experienced rapid demographic change. There are already an estimated 40,000 Islamists on terror watch lists. What happens if they move as one? Anyone who warns of the consequences of our immigration policy is denounced as far right. But back in 2016, the Labour Party's Rachel Reeves predicted the riots. The now Chancellor of the Exchequer warned that Britain could explode into rioting if immigration was not curbed after Brexit. She said, "We have got to get this right because there are bubbling tensions in this country that I just think could explode." You had these riots in 2011. If riots started again in Leeds and bits of my constituency, it's like a tinderbox. So Labour themselves recognised that our leaders should have listened to people's concerns when they were voiced peacefully. But people's democratically expressed wishes have been ignored. Brexit was effectively a referendum on immigration, but immigration soared afterwards. And Reform got 14% of the vote with a net zero immigration policy. But because of our voting system, only 5 MPs were elected. I can't put it better than this man. This is the brave man who risked his life to tackle the Southport killer.
I actually don't think that the trouble and the riots has got anything at all to do with the Southport stabbings. There appears to be a strong undercurrent of discontent for some time about the levels of immigration, and this is just a catalyst or a trigger, but I don't think it's the root cause. And I'm not particularly politically motivated, but I do get dismayed when I hear Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper talking about, the police are going to come down with the full force of the law, etc., on these people. But they're not actually talking about the root cause, and they need to start listening and understanding that they need to address the cause rather than the symptoms. Putting these guys in prison isn't going to deal with the sort of core issues. As I say, don't condone the violence, but there's an awful lot of unhappy people in this country at the moment that want something to be done, and I don't think until they start to address that, the government start to address that this problem's going to go away.
He showed exceptional bravery then, but he also shows bravery now, voicing what everyone knows but nobody says for fear of being smeared as a far-right thug. We need more men like this. And there's a simple solution to the current crisis. Working class communities are fed up with the relentless mass immigration leaving unvetted men dumped in their communities. So put these illegal arrivals with the people who want them. There are millions of big-hearted British leftists who want illegal immigrants in the UK, but because they're middle class, they don't get a chance to live next to a dilapidated hotel full of these vibrant young men. So house these men in those middle class communities. Every Labour politician, every lefty tastemaker, every public sector panjandrum needs to enjoy the consequences of their opinions. This is a crisis. Pass emergency laws to house illiterate Janjaweed militants in the spare rooms of Lily Allen, Gary Lineker, Carol Vorderman and anyone called Jolly On. Bulldoze Hampstead Heath, cover it in migrant accommodation. The people with the power and the money need to enjoy the enrichment that they insist on. And don't tell me it can't be done. You built Nightingale hospitals in 9 days, drain the fuel from the fire in working class areas, bring peace and stability to the country, give everyone what they want. Britain is a welcoming and intolerant place, but there are limits. I know plenty of Muslims and immigrants who fit in fine. I even married one. But immigration has to be sustainable. Everyone has to integrate, and everyone has to put British values first, because I'm worried that if we don't deal with this, we're going to erupt into worse conflict down the road, and a whole bunch of good people who've made Britain their home will get caught up in it. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you found this video enlightening, there's a link below to buy me an overpriced pint of warm beer with a wasp floating in it, and there's quite a lot of work goes into these videos, so if you want to support me making them, you can become a patron and get exclusive content and extended uncensored versions of these videos. Anyway, thanks for listening. I've been Leo Kears. Bye. Bye bye.